For a country that calls itself the Middle East's only true democracy, the changing state of the media in Israel has become a cause for concern. Freedom House, an American NGO that ranks countries based on the state of their media, recently downgraded Israel's status from free to partly free. Part of its reasoning, it said, was Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's decision to take on the additional portfolio of Minister of Communications. To say that Netanyahu has taken a hands-on approach with the Israeli news media is to sell his efforts short. He seems to want a new publicly owned television channel, which has been 2 years in the making, scrapped before its first broadcast. Netanyahu has also taken to writing long letters of complaint to individual journalists whose criticisms he cannot abide. The Prime Minister paints himself as a victim of a hostile press, even though the most widely read newspaper in the country constantly sings his praises, and it's bankrolled by an American billionaire who is happy to run that paper at a loss as long as it props up his man. The Listening Post's Will Young now from Tel Aviv on the Prime Minister who doubles as Israel's media watchdog.
September 2015. Benjamin Netanyahu cancels all interviews previously arranged with newspapers and TV stations and uploads a video to his social media accounts. The video was called Things You Won't Hear in the Media. Not trusting journalists to present him positively, Benjamin Netanyahu at times will simply bypass them, and at times will go to war.
Netanyahu found himself in a battlefield, which he was the target, and the snipers came from the media with cameras. Most of the journalists in Israel dislike him, and most of the media in Israel are not really favorite for Netanyahu. Since the media is not really objective, he thought that he might find ways to make it subjective, but for his purpose.
He's taken under his portfolio management the communication ministry, which is kind of strange because you would expect the prime minister to care more about security of the country or foreign affairs of the country. But apparently Netanyahu thinks that the most important issue is dealing with reporters.
The latest accusation to assail Netanyahu's government involves what may be large-scale corruption in a deal to purchase German submarines. The story was exposed by Raviv Drucker, who has long tormented the Prime Minister from the newsroom of Israel's privately owned Channel 10. Netanyahu has hit back at Drucker personally on Facebook. Defending Netanyahu are his colleagues in the right-wing Likud party, such as Yariv Levin.
Adam Yashar Hagun.
Even now, I had a speech in the parliament about those allegations about the submarines. Next thing, when they didn't succeed in the bottom of the sea, probably will try and find some kind of a spaceship. Go back and see the faces of the journalists in the night of the elections. They weren't exactly celebrating.
Netanyahu is trying to change the game in a way that takes us far away from what a democracy should be. Look at the example of Channel 10, that for over a few years was held in a regulatory uncertainty, while the Prime Minister's office is pressuring Channel 10 to restrain criticism that was mainly heard by Raviv Drucker. So you see a Prime Minister leading a very personal battle against a private channel and a specific journalist just because he dares criticizing him.
And the same kind of uncertainty is affecting the public media too. Israel is currently awaiting the launch of a new public broadcaster to replace the existing authority whose appeal and credibility have long been in question. But though the new channel was planned by one of Netanyahu's ministers in 2014, the PM and his allies have in recent weeks launched attacks that threaten to strangle it at birth.
הוא נחטף על ידי אנשים שהאג'נדה שלהם היא שמאלנית, אנטי-ממשלתית.
What should have been a public and very open broadcasting authority is becoming more and more, again, one-sided, with people, especially in the management and in the places that they can influence the overall content in a way that we are receiving something that is even worse than what we have now.
This whole body is already in the process of starting to broadcast and recruiting journalists. And all of a sudden, Netanyahu, at this dramatic moment, is trying to interrupt that. The aim is to maintain political power over the public media. So the public media does not belong to the public, it belongs to the prime minister.
In Israel's print media, Netanyahu, known to both friends and enemies as Bibi, already has the upper hand. In 2007, a new daily newspaper came to town, Israel Hayom, whose owner, US billionaire Sheldon Adelson, is a staunch Netanyahu supporter and is rich enough to keep the free newspaper afloat despite losses of an estimated $3 million a month. Israel Hayom, which now has nearly 40% of Israel's shrinking newspaper market, is commonly derided as Bibiton, or Bibi's paper, since critics see in it an obvious pro-Netanyahu bias. Israel Hayom's closest rival, Yediot Ahronot, used to be so successful that it was officially declared a monopoly. Now it's fighting to catch up. Igal Sarna is a columnist for Yediot. He himself has been sued by Netanyahu for posts on Facebook.
Of course, my newspaper was the biggest, but there was a competition. There was Haaretz, there was other newspapers, there was Ma'ariv, and now there is only one that doesn't act according to normal rules. When you look at this paper, you think that Bibi is the editor. A huge newspaper with a huge amount of money to lose, and the other newspaper has to fight for their lives. And it's a disaster for the press.
We had a bully in the neighborhood, Yediot Ahronot. Netanyahu just brought a bigger bully to the neighborhood, a stronger one. Israel Hayom is surely not a newspaper. It employs journalists, it calls itself a newspaper, but it doesn't follow any of the rules of the profession as we know it.
Even with Israel's largest circulation daily newspaper firmly on his side, Benjamin Netanyahu portrays himself as a man under attack, a man whose achievements go unrecognized, and even whose wife is not spared the barbs of biased journalists. So is it a paradox that arguably the most powerful man in Israeli politics sees himself as the victim of a hostile press? Or is it a political calculation?
Even the Prime Minister has the right to criticize the press, which I just did.
It's very easy for right-wing politicians here or elsewhere in the world to treat the media as biased to the left. You need a constant enemy. It used to be the Iranian threat.
A red line should be drawn right here.
Or maybe the Palestinian threat.
צריכים להגן על עצמנו, מפני חיות הטרף.
I think overall in Netanyahu's mind, the way to get voters into the polls is being in a constant fight with reporters.
Settlers and right-wing voters, low socio-economic levels inside Israel, for many years felt that they have no voice in the Israeli media. They are watching journalists on TV that really do not represent them. They read newspapers with columns of journalists that don't really talk to them. For Netanyahu, it's half strategy and half obsession. He will blame the media for many things. Part of them are true, part of them are not. At the end of the day, there is a mix between his own passion and between his deep understanding that the media is a good tool for elections.